It all started early this morning. Typing this out was hard for many reasons, but you'll understand why by the end of this. Just bear with me. I had a craving for sushi, but I'd gotten off work way too late to pick up anything from the local hibachi place in town. As my truck barreled down the road, I couldn't help but think about how long it had been since I'd actually eaten anything though. I always skipped breakfast, and I'd woken up a little late for my 7 p.m. shift, so I'd slept right through lunchtime. Tonight had been so busy that I barely had any time to breathe. By the time I clocked out at 3 this morning, it finally hit me that I was starving. In all honesty, I could have eaten just about anything, but my taste bud had a hankering for some type of sushi. So I caved. I stopped at a gas station and parked my truck in one of the many empty spaces near the front of the store. The little silver bell on the door let out a shrill scream the second I shoved through it. My work boots tracked in a bit of mud, but the floor looked like it hadn't been mopped in ages, so I didn't feel too bad. As I moved towards the back of the store where the deli items were located, my eyes landed on several types of sandwiches: tuna salad, roasted chicken, honey-baked ham, and pimento cheese. There was a hot dog machine on the counter. The dogs wrinkled and dry. I scrunched up my nose. The smell pungent and strange. It almost smelled a bit rancid, but that's not what I was there for anyways. The second my eyes landed on the last box of sushi, I easily pushed that thought to the side. As I snatched it up, I peered through the clear container to try and figure out just what kind it was. It definitely wasn't fried, but it didn't look like any type of sashimi either. 4 perfect cylindrical rolls lay neatly beside each other on what looked like a bed of folded parchment paper. A dab of wasabi was smeared in the corner, and a few slices of thinly cut pickled ginger was nestled up next to it. There was no label and no expiration date, so with a quick glance around the gas station, I brought the box up to my nose and sniffed. It smelled fine, so I shrugged and toted it up to the cash register. I shuffled in place for a few moments, waiting for someone to come slinking out of the back of the store to check me out. But that place was dead as a doornail. That's when my eyes caught sight of the sign next to a little silver bell, perched on the desk. Ding the bell for assistance. With a small tap, the bell tinged, and within a couple seconds, a slim brunette woman appeared. A small smile tugged at her lips as she grabbed the sushi and typed in the number on the side of the container.
Is that all for you today?
Her hands were already shoving it into the bag before I spoke. Actually, I was wondering, what kind of sushi is that? There wasn't any label or pricing or...
It's just a California roll.
She blurted out, her face instantly paling. Her eyes were shifting between me and something behind me. I raised a quizzical brow. Are you sure that doesn't look like crab meat? Her eyes pleaded with me not to probe any further, once again flickering between me and something behind me.
I'm positive. It's probably because it's imitation crab meat.
She awkwardly laughed, her hand shaking slightly.
Your total comes to $10.52.
She squeaked, eyes barely meeting mine. My hands dug around in my pocket, producing 2 5s. I dug around a little more for some change, when I noticed something odd in the reflection of one of the convex security mirrors. A man stood near the back of the store, close to the restrooms. His hulking form took up the entirety of the small hallway as he leaned against a wall. Something sharp was nestled in his hand. The filthy fluorescent lights glinted off of the metal. I squinted my eyes, and then paused. I dropped the change onto the counter, stilling, when I realized what he was clutching. A knife. A hand shot out to clutch my own, frightened blue eyes catching mine as her trembling lips mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. Regardless, she knew that I knew what was going on. Despite wanting to dart out of the place like my pants were on fire, I couldn't help but feel some type of sympathy for the woman. She was much too small to fight him off, and I'd feel horrible if I just left her here to deal with the situation on her own. Who knows what sick, twisted ideas this man had in mind? Either way, I figured that none of them would be pretty. So, I had to be strategic. I needed to keep her talking until I could figure out a plan. That man was clearly waiting for me to leave before he made his move. Or perhaps he was sizing me up. I was a pretty big man myself, towering over most of the shelves in this gas station, enough that I could see the dust that coated everything in a thin gray film. The sound of the cash register slamming closed was what brought me back to her worried expression. Her small hand reached out before she said,
Sir, would you like a receipt?
I almost instinctively said no, before I saw something scrawled on the other side of the paper. Don't leave me here alone with him. My eyes softened as I met hers, my mind coming up with a million things to talk about until I settled on a plan to help her. Yes, I'll take that. I took the paper from her hands and shoved it into my back pocket. Actually, do you have any soy sauce packets? The woman nodded.
Yes, I think I've got some extra packets.
Her eyes drifted behind me for a second before she reached under the counter and held up the packets.
Are two okay?
Her fingers trembled, dropping one of them onto the floor. I heard her quietly curse before she hurriedly picked it up and slammed it on the counter next to the other.
Anything else?
Her cool blue eyes watered as she sucked her bottom lip in between her teeth. I tried to scramble for any way to stall, watching as he neared us. I fumbled for a response before I ripped open the sushi container and popped one of the pieces of sushi into my mouth. Got any chopsticks? I blurted out, speaking through a mouthful of food. Once again, I watched as the man halted in place before she nodded, ducking under the counter. That's when I realized that the flavor of this sushi was really off. In fact, something crunchy was stuck in between my teeth. I tugged it free, but had no time to examine what it was before she popped back up again.
Here you go.
She whimpered, shoving the chopsticks into my bag, eyes darting behind me once again. Her skittish behavior had me on edge, and I couldn't help but feel the unease that settled over me as I glanced up at the mirror once again. The man was now standing in between the candy bar and the chip aisle, a strange smirk plastered across his face. I watched as his tongue darted out, trailing along the blade of the knife, a rope of saliva stretching from his tongue to the knife like melted mozzarella cheese. A chill settled over my arms, the hairs standing on end. This dude was one sick son of a gun. My attention was quickly averted when I felt the cool sensation of metal pressed against the top of my hand. My eyes whipped back to the woman's, a wicked grin flickering across her lips. Before I could even react, she was moving fast, much too fast for me to process what she had actually done. In fact, my body was in so much shock that when she plunged the blade through the top of my hand, nailing it to the countertop, I had no time to scream. Instead, a quiet hiss left my lips, turning into an agonized groan as I stared at her in complete disbelief. Thick crimson began to pool around my fingertips. My eyes flew up to meet hers, only to see her winking at the man behind me. My attention quickly whipped up to the mirror again as he slowly stalked closer to me. What is this? I managed to sputter out between clenched teeth. The woman's smile widened before she dipped a finger into the blood staining the countertop and brought it to her lips. I watched as her tongue swiped it off with a quick little flick.
You know,
She started, her eyes darting back behind me before meeting mine.
you taste almost as delicious as you look.
Before I could even respond, a car pulling into the parking lot caught the attention of all three of us. It swung into the spot next to my truck, and an audible sigh of relief left my lips when I realized that it was one of those blacked out police cruisers. The woman cursed under her breath, wrenching the knife from my hand and tossing it under the counter. The man behind me halted, and then quickly ducked behind the circular deli cooler, crouching on the ground. The thin little brunette and I locked eyes before she gritted out angrily.
Don't you say a word.
The both of us watched as he strolled out from behind my truck before walking up to the front of the gas station. When I glanced back at the counter, I watched as the woman hastily soaked up as much of the blood as she could with a wad of napkins before she shot me a menacing look.
Shove your hand in your hoodie and don't you dare take it out.
She threatened, tossing the napkin into the trash. I was quick to comply, cradling it within fabric and hoping that it would help slow the bleeding. "Sir?" Both of us turned. The officer's arm settled across his chest as he stared up at me. "Is that your truck out there in the parking lot?" I gulped, feeling the blood soak into the pockets of my hoodie. Yes, sir. Is there a problem?" The officer scratched his beard before his eyes glanced at the woman, and then down at the strange stain on the countertop. His black leather boots squeaked on the dirty linoleum floor as he approached the counter. I couldn't help but follow his gaze as his eyes scrutinized the stain on the side of the woman's arm. "You spill something, little lady? You've got something on your arm there." His voice was gruff and deep, something about it very nonsensical. I watched her bristle, eyes warily meeting his as she tried to play it off.
Oh, just some soy sauce is all.
The officer quickly hummed in response before he nodded towards the bag of sushi sitting on the counter, his eyes drifting to me. "Son, if you know what's best for you, I reckon you ought to know that gas station sushi is never a good idea." With a pause, he shrugged, speaking again before I could answer. But I guess that's your prerogative." With a nod to the lady, he fixed his gaze back on me. "Young man, could you step outside with me for a moment?" I nodded almost too quickly. The officer raised a single dark brow before he glanced down at the woman's name tag. "Georgia, would you excuse us? He'll be right back in to pay for that." She smiled sweetly at him before nodding, but as soon as he turned, her eyes narrowed, shooting daggers at me.
Sure thing.
She responded, her hands nonchalantly wiping my blood from her arm. The second we got to my truck, the officer eyed me up and down. "You know those tags are expired, right?" Dumbfounded, I circled back behind my truck. I'd never been more glad that I'd forgotten to renew my tags. If he hadn't stopped by here, I was sure that something horrible would have happened. I shoved the thought aside, shaking my head. "No, sir, but I do sincerely apologize. I've been so busy that it must have slipped my mind." With a nod, I watched as he settled his thumbs into the belt loop of his pants. "Well, luckily, they're only about a month expired, and I'm in a generous mood tonight. I reckon I can let you off with a warning, this time around." "Thank you, sir. I promise I'll get those renewed as soon as possible." My hand was in agonizing pain, the adrenaline slowly wearing off, and I was sure the blood was going to soak through my black hoodie at any given moment. I want nothing more than to tell him what was really going on, but I also wanted to make it out of this alive. My eyes shifted to Georgia, her gaze fixed on mine before repositioning to the door. That hulking behemoth of a man, who had been wielding the knife from before, pushed through the door of the gas station and called out to the officer. "Everything all right? I think we still need him to pay for that sushi." "Yep, just peachy," the officer replied before patting me on the back and motioning for me to head back into the store. "Go on then, boy." Everything in me wanted to beg him not to leave me alone with those psychopaths, but the moment I went to open my mouth, the words slammed back into the back of my throat. The second the officer turned on his heel, the man at the door flashed a knife at me, holding a finger to his lips. I begrudgingly lumbered over to the door before it hit me. The receipt. I still had the receipt tucked in the back pocket of my jeans. My uninjured hand slid into my pocket. Fingers frantically rummaged around and then stilled when they landed on the receipt paper. I quickly yanked it free and waved it into the air, my voice bellowing out so loud that I could have woken the dead. "I've already paid, actually. Got the receipt right here in my hand." My obnoxious tone got the attention of the officer, and I heard him clear his throat before he said, "Son, there ain't no reason for you to be hollering like that. Take that bag and head on home." The man in front of me growled, yanking the receipt from my fingertips before crumbling it between his fingers and trading me the bag instead. I hadn't even noticed that he had been holding it. The second my fingers snatched it up, I glanced back at the police cruiser still idling in the parking lot, before slowly backing away from the man. When I finally made it to my truck, the police cruiser was getting ready to pull out of the parking lot, but the man was still staring at me, his cold, hardened gaze like that of a well-trained predator. "You know," he snarled, his voice sharp as razor blades, "you're the first one who has ever gotten away." With a pause, he turned on his heel to head back into the store. The last few words he muttered haunted me for the rest of the whole day. It's a shame, really. We could have made so many sushi rolls out of you. Vomit crept up my throat as the bag slipped from my grasp. Fear coursed through me like white-hot lava as I slammed my truck door shut and shoved it into gear. I've never driven so fast in my life. When I finally pulled into my driveway, disbelief and disgust clawed in my insides. If I wasn't nauseous already, I certainly was now. My eyes slowly glanced down and my stomach heaved. Blood had begun to seep into my jeans, the hoodie pockets now too full to contain it. When I finally stumbled into the house, my mouth crusted in vomit, my girlfriend was quick to jump into action. I'd never been more thankful to be dating a nurse. After she got me all stitched up, gauze and bandaging wrapping the entirety of my left palm, she quickly sat across from me, her eyes full of worry.
Colton, what the heck happened tonight?
With a shake of my head, I met her concerned gaze before managing to push a few words past trembling lips. Never eat gas station sushi. I promise you. Food poisoning will be the least of your worries. Hey everybody, if you can't tell, I'm super excited because I finally have out the video that I've been wanting to do for such a long time. It's finally here, I finally did it, and honestly, I think it came out pretty good. I wanted to give a big thank you to MaidofStitches because honestly, she did such a good job with voices. It came out perfectly. Really, it glued it all together, and I'm really glad with it. If you guys are into video games and stuff like that, check out her Twitch. She occasionally streams, and honestly, it's such a fun time. I highly recommend it. Also, of course, the biggest thank yous to our author for this story, Justhegirlnextdoor. It was super awesome trying to do all the sound effects and everything for this story. I really hope that the author, as well as you guys, enjoyed it just as much as I did getting it out for you guys. Hopefully I'll have some more cool stuff like this in the future, because honestly this was it was fun. But yeah, I don't want to keep you guys for too long. I hope you guys are having a really awesome October. I know I am. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay spooky, friends.